Hi, Stephen.
Hi, Torsten. How are you?
Good, thanks. So, Stephen, in a few weeks, Trump will be the new US president and the US Senate will be controlled by the Republicans. Where do you see major policy changes that could impact the clean tech industry?
There will be a lot of change, and most of that change will come inside of government itself. So there are a couple things to pay attention to. One is the big Inflation Reduction Act that was the Biden administration's hallmark climate policy and economic development policy. I think we can talk about that in a second. It's unclear whether that will be touched. The big changes to watch in the U.S. right now are the dismantling of government agencies. Trump has promised to come in and try to make it easier to fire people. He has promised a very severe deregulatory agenda, and I think you will see an attempt to push climate science out of many agencies, to try to privatize operations within government agencies, and to emphasize fossil fuels over clean energy in places like the Department of Energy. Now, if we think about the change that many expect with the Inflation Reduction Act, which is this multi-$100 billion package that has supported over $100 billion in factories, there is a big question about whether Congress will come together and start to dismantle that package. And Trump has said he wants to do that. Republicans in Congress sent a letter to the Speaker of the House and said, please do not touch this program because so much of the money is headed to Republican states. And over 80% of the dollars from that package have gone to Republican states. And so there's this big question as Republicans look to negotiate a large tax package with the president next year, if those tax credits will be touched or untouched. And I think that there will likely be some changes, but not some sweeping change that will dismantle the package. So there's a lot of nuance.
Okay. So basically, we saw a certain pickup in US manufacturing of solar cells and modules. So you would assume that this will not be stopped now with the new administration?
No, I think we will probably not see much stopping of progress of building new manufacturing facilities. Things that have already been announced that are in place will probably remain untouched. What could complicate matters is, certain grant programs that have been left unspent. If Republicans indicate they will touch manufacturing tax credits, that could impact future development, things that are in the early stages of planning right now. So yes, it could have an impact, but the big wild card is not just what happens to manufacturing tax credits, it's Trump's tariffs. And he has said he wants a 60% tariff on all Chinese goods. He wants more targeted tariffs on imported goods from almost every other country. And so that could, of course, change the calculation for domestic manufacturing. It's very possible that it makes more sense for certain companies to manufacture in the U.S. as a result of those penalties, but it's a very complicated picture for the industry. Obviously, on the downstream development side, it makes expensive equipment more expensive and causes inflationary impacts, and so there's a lot of question. But I don't think that there's going to be some hollowing out of manufacturing under the Trump administration.
Yeah. Okay. And where do you think the industry is protected by its own mechanisms? Because simply other forces matter more than what the president thinks is good or bad.
That's exactly right. And I think that's the most important thing to remember, in particular about the U.S. market. This is still such a state-driven market. And what we see in the vast majority of states around the U.S. is very aggressive decarbonization policy. You see a lot of utilities. There are still some utilities that are slow moving, but most of the major utilities are also investing very heavily in decarbonization plans and renewables specifically. And so that will not let up. None of that will change. And in fact, we expect states to invest further in their own programs under the Trump administration. And what we saw under the first Trump administration was states banded together and they said, we are going to set targets that get us to the Paris commitments. And so all of a sudden you saw this step up in state policy that was consistent with Paris commitment targets. And so we definitely expect more of that activity. And so, yes, there are some grant programs that intersect with state programs that could be impacted, but there's so much activity happening on the local level that will likely not get derailed. And then, of course, the reality in so many areas of the world, and in particular the U.S., is that renewables are the lowest cost resource. And so the reality is that the vast majority of resources that are being developed in the U.S. now are renewables and now storage. And so this year in the U.S., we're probably going to see 85% of new capacity being wind, solar, and batteries.
Yeah.
And so the Trump administration in its first term said that they wanted to promote coal. They wanted to save the ailing coal industry. They did not do that. We saw record amounts of coal retired under the Trump administration because of the economics of clean energy, both renewables and natural gas. So I think that he said he wanted to stop the development of wind projects because he really highly dislikes wind in particular. And we saw explosive growth of renewables because of these economic forces under the first Trump administration. So the economics in particular and the state policy together will really continue momentum for the industry under this administration.
Cool. And then we have two new prominent figures on the politics level. That's Elon Musk and Peter Thiel. What do you think? What will be their impact on energy policy or the energy industry in general?
This is going to be one of the most interesting stories to watch. So Trump has railed against electric vehicles for a long time, but then all of a sudden in August, when Elon Musk started throwing hundreds of millions of dollars behind his campaign and got closer to the former president, now president-elect, Trump came out and said, I love electric vehicles now. I have to because Elon told me so. And this is a president who, if you get in his good graces, he is highly influenceable. And so you have these billionaire backers who understand the value of clean energy, who want to invest in advanced nuclear, carbon removal, electric vehicles. They want to expand the grid, and they will have the president's ear. And so while I suspect there will be some programs that take a hit, there's going to be all sorts of stuff that this administration will very likely emphasize, like perhaps more electric vehicle charging, definitely advanced nuclear, expansion of the grid to meet new data center demand from AI. A lot of the venture capitalists who are now connected to this administration are really pushing a deregulated agenda to push more data center development. And what's serving those data centers? Well, yes, some natural gas, but a lot of renewables, a lot of batteries, a lot of advanced grid technologies that are opening up new capacity. And so I see their influence as really expanding the Republican emphasis on this wide variety of technologies that could clean up the grid. It's a nonlinear process. I think very well we could see our emissions gains be wiped out under this administration while simultaneously promoting a ton of really interesting zero carbon, low carbon technologies. And so those are the two stories to watch. It just depends on how much the administration wants to dismantle and how much they want to serve this new growing demand in the U.S. with advanced grid technologies and clean energy. And I think it's going to be a combination of both.
Exciting times ahead of us. Stephen, thanks a lot for the espresso time with you. Hope we can catch up soon and talk about the latest developments over there in your country, the US. Yeah.
Yes, let's stay in touch. Thanks for inviting me and happy to talk again.
Bye-bye.